Tonight, the father of a 7-year-old boy and his girlfriend are now facing felonies in connection to the boy's death. Right now, both are sitting in the Marion County Jail with a $100,000 bond.
And according to court documents, in May 2024, Kayden weighed about 48 pounds. But by the time of his death, he weighed a mere 32 pounds.
December 22nd, 2024, 3 days before Christmas. While most families in Indianapolis were wrapping presents, baking cookies, and filling their homes with the sounds of holiday cheer, one house on the 1300 block of South Pershing Avenue stood strangely quiet. It was a modest home, nothing unusual, nothing that would draw attention from the outside. But behind that door was a story so dark, so heartbreaking, that even seasoned officers would struggle to put it into words. That evening, police were dispatched to the address after a welfare call. At first it seemed routine. Calls like these often turn out to be misunderstandings. A child staying with a relative, a parent not answering the phone. But as officers stood on the front step and knocked, unease grew. No one answered. Seconds dragged into nearly 2 full minutes. Then at last, the door creaked open. That pause, that heavy silence, was the first sign that something was terribly wrong. Inside, the home felt different from the usual chaos of a house filled with children. There was no laughter, no holiday music playing in the background. Instead, the air was heavy, unnatural, suffocating. Officers walked through the narrow hallway and into a back bedroom stripped of comfort and warmth. On the bare floor of that room, they found 7-year-old Kayden Gavarrete, unresponsive, lifeless. The discovery was as haunting as it was heartbreaking. Neighbors later admitted something chilling. Many of them hadn't even realized a child lived in that home. Imagine that. A young boy once full of energy, a child with a smile that could light up an entire room, had over time seemed to vanish from the outside world. He had disappeared in plain sight. How could this happen? How could a child become invisible in his own neighborhood, his struggles unnoticed until it was far too late? This case is not just about what happened on that December night. It's about the months, even years of warning signs that went ignored, the people who stayed silent, the system that was supposed to protect him, but failed again and again. And so we are left asking difficult questions. How many red flags need to be raised before someone listens? How many times can a child cry out directly or silently before their voice is heard? As we dive into this case, be prepared. Some of what you're about to hear will be disturbing, deeply unsettling, but these are the truths we cannot look away from. Before we continue, welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we share true cases that matter, cases that reveal not only unimaginable cruelty, but also the failures that allow it to happen. Stories like Kayden's should never be forgotten. If you believe in raising awareness and honoring victims, please take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share it. It helps bring these stories to more people and reminds the world that these children mattered. Kayden Gavarrete was born in October 2017 in Indianapolis. From the very beginning, he wasn't just another baby in the family, he was special. Those who knew him remember a spark in his eyes, the kind of spark that drew people in. He was bright, curious, and endlessly energetic. He loved superheroes, video games, and could spend hours running around the yard or playing with cousins. His smile, family members say, was his superpower. It lifted the mood of anyone around him. Kayden wasn't just playful, he was kind. Even as a little boy, he showed an empathy unusual for his age. If someone was upset, he'd try to comfort them. If another child was hurt, he was the first to run over. He had that rare heart, the kind that makes others feel safe. But behind his joy, Kayden's life was not easy. His mother, Tammy Mason, struggled for years with personal battles, most of them tied to substance abuse. Her struggles brought instability into the household. Despite her love for Kayden, the chaos around her seeped into his life. Then in May 2022, when Kayden was just 5 years old, tragedy struck. Tammy died from a drug-related cause. Her sudden death devastated the family. It also marked a turning point in Kayden's life. Everything changed after that day. With his mother gone, custody of Kayden was given to his father, 26-year-old Kevin R. Gavarrete. On paper, it seemed straightforward. Children usually go to their surviving parent. Kayden's maternal relatives, especially his aunt Jessica Ryan, were deeply concerned. Jessica didn't trust Kevin's ability to care for the boy. She believed Kayden would be safer, more loved, and more stable in her home. She even tried to gain custody, but the court said there wasn't enough evidence to remove him from his father. What makes this decision even more troubling is that Child Protective Services were already familiar with the family. There had been visits to the home even before Tammy's death. There was evidence of instability, of risk. But despite that, the system allowed Kayden to be placed with Kevin. It was a decision that in hindsight sealed his fate. From that moment, Kayden's bond with his mother's side of the family began to fade. Phone calls went unanswered. Invitations to see him were denied. Slowly, the boy who once had a wide circle of love, grandparents, cousins, aunts, uncles, was cut off. Relatives noticed the change. They described how his light began to dim. The playful energy he once carried everywhere seemed to fade. The boy who loved to make others smile was being pulled into silence. Life grew even more complicated when Kevin started a relationship with 20-year-old Julia M. Sizemore. It moved quickly. Julia soon became a fixture in the home, stepping into a role of caretaker for Kayden. The couple then had 2 daughters of their own. By the end of 2024, Julia was pregnant again. From the outside, it may have looked like a young couple building a family, but behind closed doors, the truth was very different. Neighbors would later describe their household as distant, isolated. Kevin and Julia kept to themselves, rarely interacting with the community. When they were seen, it was brief, quick errands, nothing more. During this time, Kevin's mother, Anne, also lived in the home. Her presence could have been a source of stability for Kayden. She might have been someone who gave him love and attention when others didn't. But then tragedy struck again. Anne died suddenly, reportedly after a fall. The official explanation was vague, and some relatives quietly questioned the circumstances. Nothing formal came of it, but her death deepened the sense of unease surrounding Kevin's household. For Kayden, it meant one more person who might have protected him was gone. Relatives watching from the outside grew increasingly alarmed. They worried about the environment Kayden was growing up in, about what was happening behind those closed doors on Pershing Avenue. But as the months passed, their fears would turn into their worst nightmare. When neighbors did see Kevin and Julia in public, at places like Kroger or Walmart, they were almost always with their 2 young daughters. But what stood out most was not who was there, but who wasn't. Kayden was missing. Rarely, if ever, was he seen in public. Several neighbors later admitted something haunting. They didn't even know a 7-year-old boy lived in that house at all. Imagine that, an entire child's existence fading so far into the background that even those living just a few feet away were unaware. For a time, Julia's brother and his girlfriend also lived under the same roof. They had opportunities to see what life inside that home was really like. They had glimpses of how Kayden was treated, but when they eventually moved out, just weeks before his death, they never reported what they had witnessed. Their silence became one more missed chance to save him. According to the Coalition for Responsible Home Education, which later cited details from the probable cause affidavit, Kayden was listed as being homeschooled during the 2024-2025 year. On paper, that might have looked like a choice his parents made to protect him or give him special attention. But investigators quickly discovered there was little to no evidence of genuine schooling happening at all. Instead, what emerged was a devastating picture: a child cut off from the outside world. Without teachers, classmates, or school officials, Kayden had no safety net. No one outside the home had regular contact with him. No one who might have noticed the signs of abuse or neglect. Family members noticed the changes most. They described how Kayden seemed frightened of both Kevin and Julia. They said he looked smaller, weaker, less joyful. They noticed how often he was left alone, isolated, and in some cases, even denied basic care. These were troubling signs, but no one realized just how close he was to the edge. In the weeks leading up to December 22nd, Kayden's decline became impossible to ignore for those who saw him. Relatives recalled that he no longer looked like the lively child they once knew. He appeared frail, almost fragile. On more than one occasion, he asked for food. For a child who once had boundless energy, this was alarming. His decline wasn't just visible, it was undeniable. Yet despite these warnings, his situation remained hidden, shielded by the walls of his home and the silence of the adults responsible for him. When questioned later, Kevin told investigators that his son had been sick for weeks. He claimed Kayden refused to eat and admitted the boy had lost significant weight. But instead of taking him to a doctor, Kevin avoided medical care. Why? Because he feared what professionals might say when they saw his son's condition. Julia offered a different story. She claimed Kayden didn't look sick at all. Instead, she said his problems were behavioral, that he was hyperactive, resistant, difficult to manage. She minimized his suffering, suggesting his decline was more about attitude than health. Neither story matched reality. Instead of seeking help, Kevin and Julia spun a web of implausible explanations. Kevin suggested maybe Kayden had drunk household chemicals, though he admitted he never actually saw it happen. Julia claimed the marks on his body might have been from tantrums, that he had injured himself by throwing fits. Their words downplayed the severity of his condition. They painted him as a difficult child instead of a child in danger. Relatives added a disturbing detail. Julia allegedly told them that one day Kayden had said he wanted to see his mother, the mother who had died in 2022. After that, Julia claimed the boy was suddenly unable to walk. But instead of rushing him to the hospital, she mentioned it casually in conversation, as if it wasn't urgent. Investigators would later record this moment in their timeline, one of the most chilling indicators of how his suffering was ignored. By this point, all the warning signs were there. Kayden was weak. Kayden was hungry. Kayden was visibly unwell. And yet, the adults responsible for him did nothing. Their silence toward authorities ensured his decline remained hidden until it was far too late.
Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We do begin with new information on the tragic death of 7-year-old Kayden Gavarrete in Indianapolis. The investigation is revealing new details. 2 people are now facing neglect charges after his brutal death. That does include that boy's father, Kayden Gavarrete, and his ex-girlfriend, Julia Sizemore. News 8's Raina Revel is here with new information tonight. Raina.
As police continue to gather evidence and information surrounding this heartbreaking case, new court documents have surfaced, unveiling disturbing insights into Kayden Gavarrete's final days. According to the probable cause affidavit, the 7-year-old child, Kayden Gavarrete, was found unresponsive in a home near the southwest side of Indianapolis on December 22nd. Medics pronounced him dead at the scene, with his body showing severe signs of trauma, malnourishment, and other evidence, including bruises, burns, and scars. The coroner on scene found Kayden Gavarrete's body had rigor mortis in jaw and head only. His body also showed multiple cuts, scabs, bruises on face and head, bruises on lower stomach, legs, and feet. He was found in his bluey sleeping bag he had gone to sleep in that night. Court documents also show that Julia had left Kevin and was found at an extended stay hotel near the airport. Kayden was reportedly homeschooled after being pulled from school due to bullying. His father, Kayden Gavarrete, stated that the boy had been unwell for about a month and showing signs of acting out following the death of his biological mother. The father also states that Kayden may have also been drinking contents from bottles with chemicals in the kitchen. The parents claim that Kayden had not been seen by a doctor in over a year and weighed just 45 pounds. A longtime neighbor who lives down the street says he often helps other residents, but found the interactions with the arrested couple to be off when he offered to assist with lawn care.
It's so shocking right now, and it's so close to home. If you don't want your kids, take them to somebody, call somebody. There's somebody that'll take them.
On January 2nd, 2025, just 10 days after the death of 7-year-old Kayden Gavarrete, the Marion County Courthouse in Indianapolis became the stage for a scene that no one in his family ever imagined they would witness. The cold winter morning had barely broken when Kayden Gavarrete and his girlfriend, 20-year-old Julia Sizemore, were led into the courtroom in handcuffs. Their faces were expressionless, but the weight of the accusations hung heavy in the air. For many in the room, it was impossible to separate these 2 adults from the tragedy that had shaken their family. They were not strangers. They were the people who had been entrusted with Kayden's care, the ones who were supposed to keep him safe after his mother's death. Yet now they stood accused of neglect so severe that it cost him his life. The hearing itself lasted less than half an hour, but it carried enormous significance. Prosecutors laid out the first set of charges: neglect of a dependent resulting in death, along with several additional counts of neglect tied to the couple's 2 surviving children. They pointed to the affidavit, a grim document that outlined not only Kayden's malnourished state, but also the inconsistencies in Kevin and Julia's statements about how his condition had gone unnoticed. As the judge read through the charges, Kayden's relatives sat just a few feet away, their faces tight with grief and anger. The tension was palpable. This wasn't simply a legal proceeding for them. It was the first opportunity to look Kevin and Julia in the eyes after Kayden's death. It was also a painful reminder of the months of warnings they had tried to raise, warnings that were ignored until it was too late. But what shocked them most was the judge's decision regarding bail. Despite the seriousness of the allegations, Indiana law dictated that bond amounts follow standard procedures. Each defendant's bail was set at $100,000, but with the option to pay only 10%, just $10,000 for release. To Kayden's grieving family, this decision felt like a cruel insult. Outside the courthouse, emotions boiled over. Relatives and supporters spoke to reporters, describing their outrage that the two could walk free so soon after being charged in connection with a child's death. For them, the idea that Kevin and Julia might return to their neighborhood was unbearable. They worried it would mean more delays in justice, another sign that the system valued procedure over accountability. Prosecutors tried to reassure the family, stressing that the investigation was still active. They emphasized that the autopsy and forensic testing were ongoing and that more serious charges, including murder, had not been ruled out. But for Kayden's loved ones, those words brought little comfort. They had already seen how slowly the system moved, how warnings were brushed aside until tragedy became unavoidable. The courtroom, with all its procedures and protocols, felt far removed from the suffering they knew Kayden had endured. That same day, January 2nd, 2025, while legal arguments unfolded in the courthouse, another scene was taking place far from the public eye. Kayden's family gathered for a private funeral service. The ceremony was small, deliberately shielded from cameras and headlines. Inside the quiet room, photographs of Kayden as a baby and as a bright-eyed 7-year-old were placed beside his small coffin. Relatives described it as one of the most painful moments of their lives, saying goodbye to a child who should have been looking forward to Christmas toys and birthday parties, not a final farewell. Family members who had fought for custody before his death now stood in silence, reflecting on how little power they had been given to protect him. For them, this funeral wasn't only about grief, it was also a reckoning. It was a moment to confront the devastating truth that despite their warnings, despite the clear signs of neglect, the system had failed. In the days that followed, a makeshift memorial appeared outside the modest home on South Persing Avenue, where Kayden's body had been found. At first, it was just a few candles and flowers. Then came stuffed animals, handwritten notes, and drawings from neighborhood children who had never even met him but were touched by his story. Each day, the memorial grew larger, becoming a symbol of sorrow and solidarity. Neighbors who had once admitted they didn't even know a child lived in the home now came forward with tears in their eyes. Some confessed to feeling guilty, wondering if they had missed signs, if they should have asked more questions. Strangers from across Indianapolis drove to the site, leaving messages that read, "You mattered, Kayden, and we will not forget you." The outpouring of grief was proof that even those who never met him understood the depth of the tragedy. For Kayden's maternal relatives, grief quickly turned into action. They knew that mourning alone would not change anything. His aunt, Jessica Ryan, who had tried unsuccessfully to gain custody after Kayden's mother died, became one of the leading voices calling for reform. Along with other family members, she began advocating for what they called Kayden's Law. The proposal aimed to reshape how child custody cases are handled in Indiana. Too often, the system defaulted to granting custody to a biological parent, even when red flags of abuse or neglect were present. Kayden's Law would demand that the child's safety always come first. A central piece of the proposal called for specialized training for judges and court staff on the realities of domestic violence and child endangerment, areas where many felt Indiana's courts had fallen dangerously behind. It's important to distinguish this effort from the federal Kayden's Law, which had been included in the Violence Against Women Act of 2022. That legislation encouraged states to adopt stronger protections in custody disputes, especially when allegations of abuse existed. But implementation of the federal law varied widely, and in many states, including Indiana, gaps remained. What Kayden's family wanted was a localized version, an Indiana-specific reform that directly responded to the failures exposed in his case. Their message was clear: Kayden's death was preventable. Child Protective Services had already been involved. Relatives had raised alarms. Police had documented troubling incidents. Yet despite all of this, the courts still placed him in an environment that proved fatal. The push for reform struck a chord beyond Indianapolis. Advocates for child safety across the state began voicing support, saying Kayden's story was not an isolated tragedy, but part of a broader pattern. Too many children, they argued, were left vulnerable because systems moved too slowly, treated warnings as minor, or placed parental preference above a child's well-being. The memorial outside South Persing Avenue eventually faded as the candles burned out, and the stuffed animals weathered in the cold. But the story did not fade. His name began to surface in debates about custody law, child protection reforms, and community awareness programs. For Kayden's relatives, the fight was deeply personal. They wanted his short life to mean something more than pain and loss. They wanted his story to be the catalyst for change. If Kayden had been listened to, if our voices had been taken seriously, he would still be alive today, one relative told reporters. We can't change what happened to him, but we can fight to make sure it never happens to another child. As weeks turned into months, the legal process against Kevin and Julia dragged on. Hearings were postponed, motions were filed, and dates were pushed back. By August 2025, no trial had yet begun. For Kayden's family, every delay was another wound. Each postponed hearing reminded them of the gap between the justice they desperately wanted and the slow grinding machinery of the court system. To them, justice wasn't just about conviction or sentencing, it was about acknowledgement, about the system admitting its role in failing Kayden. His story underscored how bureaucracy and hesitation can cost lives, when agencies delay action, when judges overlook red flags, when neighbors remain silent, children pay the price. Kayden's case leaves behind a painful but urgent lesson. Neglect and abuse are not always visible. From the outside, Kevin and Julia's home looked ordinary, even quiet, but behind those walls, a little boy was slowly fading away. It is a reminder that danger does not always announce itself with clear signs. Sometimes it hides in silence, in the absence of laughter, in a child disappearing from school or play dates. The responsibility to protect children rests on many shoulders: family members, neighbors, schools, social workers, and the courts. Silence and hesitation allow tragedy to take root. That is why vigilance matters. That is why reforms like Kayden's law are essential. His life, though heartbreakingly short, now carries a legacy that could help protect countless others. If lawmakers act, if communities remain alert, if families speak up and systems respond, then Kayden's death will not have been in vain.